Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can really help the show reach more loss and infertility families by taking a moment to leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. Check us out on Patreon for exclusive bonus content. Just go to patreon.com/Finding Hope After Loss. You can also check out more information about the episode in the show notes at journeyforjasmine.com. In this episode, Karen talks about her journey through miscarriage and secondary infertility due to a blood clotting disorder. We discuss her current journey of trying to conceive after loss, infertility, and how art and writing have been instrumental in her healing process. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Karen. Karen, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name is Karen, the good kind, the good kind of Karen.
Yes.
And I live and work in Minnesota, near Lake Minnetonka, just outside the Twin Cities. I teach at an online art school, and I was a classroom teacher for about 12 years before that. And I'm really happy to be with you today.
Did you also teach art then as a classroom teacher?
I started out as a special ed teacher, and then I moved to social studies and then ELA and then art, which was by far my favorite. And I've stuck with it.
That's really cool that now that you're able to do like the online format.
Yeah, it's worked out really well. My husband got a job that relocated us from Washington, D.C., where we're from, to here in Minnesota. So when we moved, I was like, it might be time to like look for the next chapter, in my career. So I'm really happy where I'm at. And it's nice to kind of work from home now.
Yeah. I know now, but now it's like such a chore to have to go out of the house to like do anything.
Absolutely.
I'm like, you
Yeah.
mean I have to put on pants?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
not
If I
just
didn't have my
sweats.
dog, I would never leave the house.
So do you mind sharing a little more about your journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my journey began just like any other. You start trying and you never assume that anything is gonna happen, and we were really, really lucky because we got pregnant within 3 months of trying. And, I feel like the first time you're pregnant, you never think, it never even crosses your mind that something could happen. And, the week we found out just so happened to be the week my family was visiting and the week that he was going to go see his family. And we're like, okay, this is so early, but oh my gosh, really exciting. Like, let's share the news. What could happen? And unfortunately, I lost that pregnancy very soon. I lost it at just after 5 weeks. And it was totally devastating, totally was unexpected as it always is. And the very next cycle, we immediately got pregnant again.
Take your time. I know it's hard to talk about.
Yeah. And the very next cycle, we immediately got pregnant, which is something that I'm learning is actually a very common occurrence. I guess just because like your body is just kind of like ready in that place that we were able to conceive, immediately after. So of course I thought I was like the most fertile person in the world. And my family lives overseas and my best friend was getting married overseas at the time. So I was like, yeah, of course, I'll get on the plane and fly. It's so early. I'll be totally fine. And as soon as I landed in Europe, the very next day I miscarried again at just over 6 weeks. And so, of course, then at that point, I thought, I think something is definitely wrong. You know what I mean? I just knew in my heart that something wasn't quite right. So I went back to the US after a few weeks and, we launched into all of the testing and all of that. And all of my testing looked normal with the exception of, my AMH, was zero point 0.8, which is low, but, doesn't mean that, I should have any problems conceiving. And we sort of like hit a break in a sort of ironic twist, I got sort of lucky to hear news that my uncle, of all people, he was going through some medical issues as well. And he found out that he had a blood clot in his lung. And his medical report indicated that he had something called PAI 4G, which says on his medical report can cause spontaneous early abortion. And my aunt, who's a nurse, saw this and passed it along to me. And so it's so funny because you never think about like your male relatives having sort of like health information that could benefit you, you know? But, thank goodness, my aunt, who is also a postnatal nurse, saw this, passed it along. And I had to sort of like beg my fertility clinic that I was doing testing with to test me for this genetic condition. And I really, really pushed for it. I really had to advocate for it. And lo and behold, we found out that I had this blood clotting condition that can cause, early pregnancy loss. And, I feel really lucky that I was able to get that sort of information because I think it's like 50% of those with recurrent pregnancy loss or those with infertility issues, half the time it's unexplained, which I think just goes to show how much more, we need to be studying this because half the time it being unexplained, that just seems like a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
So
it's frustrating though how much you had to push for it that you're saying, I have this problem. It's known to be in my family.
yeah, exactly. And that's where I do think I made a mistake by going to a fertility clinic rather than sort of like an OBGYN who specializes in infertility because my experience was that I felt like I was just sort of like being pushed to do IVF, which I obviously have no problem with, but I really wanted answers. And so I have since sort of pivoted and am now working with an OBGYN who specializes in infertility. And I feel like that office has been much more receptive to listening and trying new things and testing for new things. So that would be my advice to anyone is if you want answers, maybe start there rather than, going to a fertility clinic. And also, you got to advocate for yourself. If you know in your gut that, it's something wrong, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, push to get that tested.
Yeah, I think we know our bodies better than anybody else. So I think, we have to
Absolutely.
learn to listen to ourselves when you have that, that nagging feeling in the back of your mind saying something isn't right. We need to
Yeah,
learn to like trust ourselves and listen to that.
exactly, exactly. And as knowledgeable as doctors are, infertility and pregnancy loss is on the rise. And what I'm finding is a lot of times doctors don't have answers. And it's a field that really is understudied. And so if you feel like your gut is telling you something, that's valuable and that's something that you should listen to.
Is there any particular things that they can use to treat the blood clotting that can help
Yeah,
you in future pregnancies?
absolutely. So, we found all of this out almost a year ago. And at the time, we found a doctor who I really like and respect. We've gone through a couple, but I really like and respect this current doctor. And, she said, as soon as you get that positive pregnancy test, we can put you on Lovenox, which is a blood thinner injection. And I take a baby aspirin every day, and I will continue to do that, throughout a pregnancy. But of course, it's been 10 months since my last miscarriage, and we've been trying every month diligently, timed intercourse, the whole thing, and we've had no luck. So now we're sort of looking at recurrent pregnancy loss, but also infertility because it's been over a year of trying and we've had, no hits. So that's been very confusing and, hard to deal with. Every month that time of the month comes around, it's always hard because you think this month is going to be the month and then it's not.
And it feels like your body's like betraying you every month. It's just like,
Totally.
what is wrong with you? Why can't
I
you just do
know.
this?
No, exactly. And then, of course, like, you, as you do, get sucked into, well, what can I do better, you know? And it comes down to like, what foods do I eat? What supplements do I take? Down to like, what, do I sleep on my, apparently sleeping on your left side is better than sleeping on your right side. And like, you hear all these things, and don't let your feet get cold. Don't do rigorous exercise in the 2 week wait, but do exercise. But then don't, and it's like there's all these things that you can do to increase your chances. And when you get that single line, at that time of the month, you feel like, well, I should have slept on my left side more. Like, it's my fault. I should have done this more, or I ate too much processed food the last week. That's what it was. And you just feel like it's your fault, and you're letting down, your parents who want to be grandparents, and like your husband who wants to be a dad. And it's just there's all these feelings that come rushing back to you at a time of the month where your happy hormones, your progesterone and all of that good stuff are already plummeting. So
Right.
it's just a double whammy.
Oh, I know. It's like, oh, good. Way to kick me when I'm down. Like,
Right,
let's just bring it all
exactly.
on.
Yep, exactly.
And I hate that too, that, it's not our fault, but we as especially as women tend to, internalize all that and,
Yeah.
feel the guilt and feel like, oh, we're letting everybody down, we're letting ourselves down, and it's hard to get out of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, I'm 33 now, and I felt like my 20s, I felt like the world was my oyster. If I wanted something, I could work for it, I could manifest it, and I could attain it. If I wanted this next job or this degree or this trip, I could work for it, I could strive for it, and I could attain it. And now it's like I feel like I'm doing everything I can, and it's, your biggest dream, and you feel like there's nothing you can do. And for someone that, you know, as many of us are, sort of like type A or, really goal oriented, like that can be a really tough pill to swallow, that you're doing all the things and it's just not working.
I relate to that so much because that's definitely me. And
Yeah,
I like to know that like I have control over the situation. If I do
exactly.
this, this, and this will happen.
Yeah.
And when we were faced with PCOS diagnosis and
Hmm.
infertility and then 3 losses, it was just like, oh my gosh, I have no control over anything. And I
Oh, yeah.
hated it.
Absolutely. And then that's compounded by the fact that everyone around you is accidentally getting pregnant or getting pregnant on the first try. Or, and you even read those articles about how somebody got pregnant in prison because they passed like clothes through the pipes, and like that's how like now she has this healthy baby. And it's like, how am I not pregnant when everyone else is getting pregnant while doing all these crazy things? It's so, so unfair. And it's hard.
It is, and it's something that I think a lot of people don't talk about because it's such a personal
Mhm.
thing. And then, again, the feelings of feeling like you're not good enough, you're not, worthy enough, or, just
Yep.
all of these things. And then you don't want to share it with people because then you don't, want to be judged for how you're feeling.
Exactly. And I have found that pregnancy loss is so taboo still. I think it's less taboo than it has been in the past, but I think it's still something that you just don't hear, a lot of people talk about. It's a member of a club that you never wanted to be in. And I suppose once you sort of enter that club, you seek out, resources and community and support that exists, like exactly like what you're doing. But short of that, I found that, pregnancy loss and infertility is such an isolating, lonely world to be in.
It
And I don't
is.
know if it's because, yeah, and I don't know if it's because it's mostly like a woman's issue and that's why it's sort of put to the periphery of society and behind closed doors more, but it compounds your grief because it can feel so isolating.
It is. I mean, even if you have all the support in the world, it's still so lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And, even my husband, who is the most supportive, amazing partner, even I sometimes feel like I'm still in this alone because it's you, your body, and your mind, all sometimes working against you. And and then of course you get the whole like, well, just be positive. And it's like, well, my mindset is not in a good place right now. So now apparently that's why I'm not getting pregnant. It's just like it's a whole cycle.
You're like, and now I have some choice words for you for saying that comment.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And when you do open up with people about your struggles, I have often found that usually the wrong thing is said. And and it's like, oh, well, at least you can get pregnant. At least it was early. Have you thought about adoption? And like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but adoption costs like 40 to $60,000. Like, if I could adopt, I would. But it's twice as the cost of IVF. Like, it's crazy. And then there's just being told to stay positive or, keep hoping, don't lose hope. I often find that it's more often than not helpful, as well-meaning and well-intentioned as it is.
Yeah, I try to remember that people are trying to be
Yeah,
helpful. So,
yeah,
I try to not be too angry at them, but sometimes it's really hard when you
totally.
repeatedly hear like the same things over and over, and then, that final one comes and you just kind of snap. Like, okay,
Yeah.
like I'm done with this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, no, seriously. And in fact, for me, like when I, was thinking about, well, what did people do that made me feel better? I remember one time when I shared sort of like this blood clotting condition that I had. I shared it with one of my good friends, and it's going to make me emotional just saying it, but she went out and like researched this condition, because she wanted to learn more about it and she wanted to share the research she had about it. And she said that she listened to podcasts about pregnancy loss because she wanted to like understand my pain. And I was just so touched.
What an amazing friend.
Yeah, and that would be my advice to anyone who doesn't know how to support their friend going through loss of any type would be to just like try to learn about like their pain because that sort of connection can make you feel so much less alone, you know? I was so touched by that and it went so far. It was And I don't think those are things you think to do, Your first reaction is to, send them food or offer reassurance, but trying to educate yourself on, what I'm going through, it just made me feel so much less alone. And I was so touched by that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think just people just showing that they care about what we're
Yeah,
going through and that they're not
yeah,
just going through the motions of, it'll happen, don't worry. What do you want for
right. Yeah,
dinner? Like
yeah,
moving
right,
on. And
right.
I think yeah, it just really shows how much they care.
Yeah, yeah. And anything people can do is always so well intentioned and so kind. But I just thought that that was so unique and so special.
The clotting condition that you have, do you know, is that something that's common or is it more rare or
Yeah, great question. So it seems to be very rare. Interestingly, it seems to be mostly in the Amish community, which I am not a member of the Amish community, nor has any of my family ever been a member. So I don't know what happened there, but super interesting that that's sort of like where they're mostly finding it. But with that being said, there are so many different types of blood clotting conditions. And in fact, at the first round of testing, they ran several tests to test for clotting disorders, and mine did not come up. My test wasn't included. So a lot of times, doctors, if they don't always know the cause of pregnancy loss, they will sort of throw the kitchen sink method at you. And a lot of times, they'll prescribe Lovenox for that first trimester in case there is some sort of blood clotting condition that hasn't been caught in the tests. But it's very rare. With that being said, the internet can be a dark place, but the internet can also be an amazing place because I found just by hopping from one Facebook support group to another, I found this whole support group with thousands of women who have this blood clotting condition and have all tried to get pregnant. And I've gotten such incredible advice and support from them. I also joined, a local, infertility support group, which is how I got my current doctor's recommendation. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am in this journey if it wasn't for, these women on social media in these groups that I will never even get a chance to meet. I've learned so much from them. So, if anyone out there has any sort of medical thing that you think, is so rare, I guarantee you there's probably a support group for you somewhere on the internet. So seek it out.
That's amazing that you were able to find that resource though of people who are dealing with
Yeah.
the exact same thing.
Oh my gosh, it's been amazing. And, I've been able to sort of like show my doctor, the group and because she's like, there's not a lot of research on this. And I'll be able to tell her, like, this is what, all these women are saying. Like, what do you think? And it's been such an incredible resource. And again, in another group was where I got the recommendation to go to my current doctor's office. And I just can't thank, those women enough who, again, I'll never be able to meet, but they've been such a huge source of help in my journey.
I do love the internet for for
Yeah,
things like that. And it's crazy
yeah,
that you can have this big support system and like you said, never actually physically meet any of them, but they're your biggest supporters.
absolutely, absolutely. And, a lot of them have already had their rainbow babies and they stick around in the group just to answer questions, just to give support, just to offer resources. And that's something that I hope I can do, in return one day too.
In working with your doctor, have they suggested anything else for helping to get pregnant since it's, taking longer this time?
So now that it's been, a year, over a year, we are going to start IUI and we're going to start the IUI process tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so I'm, entering a new stage of this journey, which is, fertility medication and treatment. And the plan right now is to try IUI, as often as we can this year. And then come next year, look at, IVF. So we'll see,
Well,
you
I'm
know.
sending all the positive and good thoughts your way
Thank
that it just
you.
takes that
Thank
one
you.
IUI and then you get to bring your baby home.
Hey, you never know. You never know. Maybe those medications and that timing is all I needed, but you just don't know. But you can always hope, right?
Yeah, and I know it's hard to, keep the hope up when you're trying month after month. And I mean, that's
Yeah.
something I definitely struggled with is trying to balance out the fear that it'll never happen, but the hope that it will happen. And it's just like a
Yeah,
constant battle between the emotions.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And, I read something that was like, for every negative thought you have, try to also have a positive thought. And that's something I really try to do
That's really good
because
advice.
yeah, I thought it was great advice. And as much as I hate when people tell me to just stay positive, I do at the same time believe in that mind-body connection, that a positive mind and truly believing that it will happen will support, it happening. And that's not to say that I think all we need to do is manifest a baby and a baby will come. I think that's so offensive. But I do think that mind-body connection is real. And, you know, quite frankly, there's a lot of times when I am not sure it'll happen. And just sitting in that fear is the most paralyzing, petrifying fear I've ever had in my entire life. Is like this belief that, I might not be a mom. It's so scary. But like you have to leave space for hope. Like you have to. It's all you can do.
I had somebody on the podcast recently, actually, who's also struggling with 6 years of infertility now and multiple losses. And,
Yeah.
she said that, like you said, that a lot of people are like, I just know it'll happen for you. Like, just, keep the hope up. And she said, but sometimes what I really need is the space to acknowledge the fear that it will never happen for me. So
Mm.
just
Yeah.
keeping the hope, but also just let people understanding that this is a valid fear and,
Yeah.
that it's something that you had to deal with. So, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And I think with that is just like what I hear is just like validating someone's feelings,
Yeah.
validating someone's reality is, just a couple days ago, I was having, you know, a breakdown, which happens monthly. And at this point, and, my mom was like, you can't be sad. You gotta stay positive. You gotta stay positive. And I was like, Mom, right now, I just need you to tell me it sucks,
Yeah.
and I think maybe there is like a generational aspect to that, but sometimes just hearing like this sucks, really helps. And I was talking to a friend the next day telling her this, and my friend goes, "There's actually nothing to be positive about right now." And I felt like her saying that made me feel so happy, which is so weird, but like I felt just such a wave of like release and like a wave of like just like, yeah, there's actually nothing to be positive about right now. Like my cycle just started. That sucks. And it made me feel happy because I felt like I was so validated in that moment.
That makes complete sense, though. It's one of those things you're like, I feel weird being happy about this, but
Right.
but I feel understood. So that's
Exactly. Exactly.
and feel like I have permission to say it does suck. I mean, I'm not
Yep.
happy right now,
Right,
and that's
right.
okay.
Yep, yep, exactly. And this was coming off of the past month and a half. We've done another round of testing. Some good news came out of it. My AMH a year ago, or less than a year ago, 8 months ago, was zero point 0.8. And since taking, various supplements and some lifestyle changes, my AMH came back as being 1.12. So that's great news. And I also had a couple, procedures to sort of like clean out my uterus, clean out my tubes. I had a hysteroscopy done where we got some fibroids and polyps out. And I had I'm gonna mess up the word, a histoplasty, but essentially they push some liquids sort of through your uterus and through your fallopian tubes to like clean out excess debris. And so, I really thought, with having these two procedures just done and testing coming back really reassuringly, you know, hormones seemed to be at good levels. I thought, oh, I could really get pregnant this month. And of course, I wasn't. And, that's a shame, but I'm also cautiously optimistic to be starting IUI this upcoming cycle and starting this new phase with fertility treatments and medications.
It's like a roller coaster, just like you have the ups and the downs, and it's up again and then it's
It
down again. It's just
really
like, oh my
is.
gosh, I want off this ride. Just
Oh, absolutely. It's such a roller coaster. And on top of that, you can't plan anything. We've had all these wedding invitations come in or requests for trips and bachelorette parties and bachelor parties. And it's like, I really, really hope I can't make it because I might be pregnant. But then if I'm not, like, and I buy a ticket last minute, like, it's going to be really expensive. But then, oh, like, this trip is going to come over on my ovulation cycle and I could miss a whole month of trying. So we're just both going to stay home. And, your life really sort of pauses. Like, you can't travel or plan things. You can't really, drink. You got to eat healthy. Like your life really does sort of like get put on pause, without a clear timeline in place.
I think that's what
And
makes it hard or
yes,
harder is not knowing
absolutely.
like this is
Yeah,
when this will end. It's just kind
exactly.
of open-ended.
Exactly. And, what I've heard from a lot of people struggling with this is they always say, like, it takes longer than you think. You know, sometimes it can take longer than you think. And that's tough. And, I miscarried immediately after a long flight. My family and a lot of my friends live overseas, and you know, I've said that I will never travel when I'm trying to conceive, when I am pregnant, like I am not doing any of that. And, as a teacher, I always, have summers off and I would always travel a lot. And that was a big part of my identity. And, my life looks different now. And I'm learning to like find beauty in the everyday and, romanticize the everyday things because you have to find joy anywhere you can. But I'm working a lot harder to be happy than I ever have in my life. I've always been really blessed in that my natural mood is pretty happy and pretty positive, and that's a blessing to have. But I have never worked so hard on my mental health than I have this past year. And I've learned a lot about myself and my strength, but it is a constant effort. Like you said, it's such a roller coaster. And it's also just like a constant effort to maintain your mental and physical health.
Which is then exhausting because then you're just like, oh, I'm so tired of doing
Exhausting.
this. Like, I just want to
It's
not do it.
That is the perfect word for it. Like it is exhausting working so hard to be happy. It really is. And, one thing I have learned just from, following social media accounts like yours is that a lot of women say that throughout this process of loss and waiting, they often sort of like lose them and lose like who they are. Like I miss the person that I used to be, and this type of loss, it keeps on losing. It's the
Yeah.
like miscarriage loss. I have always thought of it as like it's the loss that keeps on giving because you're always tracking, milestones and timelines that you thought you'd be past. And it's just, as you said, it's exhausting.
Yeah. I mean, we're completely different people. And I feel like it's, going through infertility and loss, both are just lifelong things, like you said, that just keep on giving. Like, I mean, even years down the road, you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
like this set me off. And, it's
yeah,
because of what I went through back then. Because really, it is a trauma. It's
absolutely.
trauma. And
Absolutely.
people don't always acknowledge it as that.
100%. And, I think sometimes I get more, I guess, sympathy because I've had recurrent loss. Whereas I have a very good friend who has never been pregnant, has never seen those two lines, and has done everything that she can. And it will probably never happen for her. And I don't think that I don't think that her loss is understood in the same way that, you know, pregnancy loss or pregnancy loss of any sort is. I think, and that sort of infertility is such a loss. And I feel like that's understood differently. And I've seen what she's gone through as well. And I mean, I think it's yeah, they're just both such losses.
Yeah, I feel like people try to do even if it's not consciously, they try to do the comparison game. So, like, oh, well, their baby was stillborn, so that's worse because they were further. Or, well, they
Yeah.
had a miscarriage, but they were able to get pregnant. So
Right.
that's
Right.
worse than somebody who's never been pregnant, when really they're
Right.
all terrible and they all suck,
100%.
you
Yeah,
know?
100%. And it's all about sort of, you know, perspective too. I mean, I would never compare my early losses to, a stillborn loss. However, it's also about perspective. Like for me, this is the worst thing that has ever happened to me, and for my friend with infertility, it's the worst thing that has ever happened to her. And so in that sense, it's incomparable, they're the worst things that's ever happened to us. You can't compare that.
Yeah, exactly. We just go through what we go through, and that,
Yeah.
like you said, is the worst thing for us,
Yeah.
which is why you can't judge what other people are going through because you have not been in their shoes and you
Yeah.
don't know what that experience is to them. You just know
Yeah.
what your experience is to you.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
It's it's just emotional all around.
It really is. It really is. And I'm so disheartened to find that infertility is on the rise. It's such a sad trend to see because, as I always say, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. It is a living nightmare. And I'm so sad to see that it's on the rise. And I really hope that, doctors and the medical community can take a bigger look at, the female anatomy and the neonatal process and like why is so much of this unexplained and what can we do about it? Because the idea that, a woman like me 10 years down the line could be going through this is heartbreaking to think about.
Well, and think how easily you could have been put in the unexplained category if this thing hadn't happened. But there is a reason. They just
Yeah,
didn't know to look for that or didn't include that or
yeah,
whatever the reason.
exactly. And the level that I had to advocate to get that test was wild. And, the only reason that I found out was because my aunt, who's a nurse, just so happened to be visiting that weekend that I was pregnant. And, other aunts and uncles, I've never shared this with. So if she hadn't been, in town, she wouldn't have known to share it with me. So I'm very thankful. Not that my uncle had a blood clot in his lung, but I am thankful
Let's be
that,
clear. No.
yeah, but I am thankful that, knowledge is power and, that I was able to get that information.
So switching gears a little bit, but since you do, or since you teach art, I know that there's been, a lot of things I've seen about art therapy, like helping with grief. Is that anything that you've ever done or taught or anything related to
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. In fact, my a lot of my research has been on therapeutic practices and mindfulness in the art room as it pertains to students who have experienced trauma. And I have found that I have pulled from a lot of those resources lately. Meditation, it's really not like sort of like a woo-woo thing. It really has helped me so much. And I have never created more in the last year, and I don't even know how long. Like I have written, I've done so much writing, like journaling and poetry and painting and photography and so much in the past year because I think creating something that wasn't there before has really helped sort of not fill the big giant hole in my heart, but certainly make me feel better and make me feel more fulfilled than I was before. And for the first time in my life, like I've been writing poetry and journaling because sometimes your thoughts are so big and your emotions are too big to really share with someone that, you know, writing it down can sort of put words to really big, complicated emotions, even if it's just for you.
Yeah. Do you think art therapy is useful for people even if they aren't good at art, Like,
Absolutely. I am not good at art. Like, I'm really not. I just love it. And, I truly believe, like in the art world, there's sort of like two types of art teachers. One is the art teacher who will tear your work apart and tell you you're awful and tell you that only X, Y, and Z counts as art. And the other, which I am of the camp, is like, everything around you is art. Everyone is an artist. The food that you cook is art. Like the way that you keep your garden is art. The way that you dress is art. The way that you love each other is art. And I truly believe that everyone is an artist. And if that art came from you, how can it be bad? And
I
I
like
truly
that
believe
philosophy.
that. Yeah, yeah. And so, my art is not that great by a lot of, I think, technical historical standards, but I love it and it makes me happy. And that's the whole point.
Yeah, and I always think, about not saying everybody's going to have a famous painting or anything, but
Yeah,
the types of new artists that came up that weren't doing what everybody else did, and then suddenly
yeah,
they became a new type of art. So,
exactly, exactly. Yep, exactly. And beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right?
yeah. And I think things like that are, things we don't think can help us through grief because we don't think we're good at them, but you
Yeah,
don't have to be good at them. You don't have to be the
100%.
perfect writer. You don't have to have it doesn't have to be all, grammatically correct or, whatever.
Yep,
It just has to be
yep.
you doing it.
Exactly, exactly. And if you're listening to this and you're like, art is not my thing, oh my gosh, ew. My biggest advice would be for those living in this in-between phase is like find a hobby, find a goal that has nothing to do with your health or your job or your fertility journey. Like find something to focus on that just like makes you happy. If it's trying a new recipe every week or gardening or paint, like find something, that is not connected to trying to get pregnant.
I think that is amazing advice. Yeah, just finding something that's just for you, that's
Yeah.
completely separate, that you get to just have that time for you to be
Yep.
happy and do the thing that you want to do without
Yep.
worrying
Yep.
about all this other stuff.
Exactly. And if it's something that like you can even sort of like work towards some sort of goal for like that for like those endorphins that you can get when you are able to achieve something. I mean, for me, art, I think there's always something beautiful in having made something that wasn't there before. and I realized that gardening is not my thing. Like, I did not like the idea of planting a bunch of seeds and having to water and tend to it. And if they didn't grow, you failed, because that felt a lot like infertility. So, gardening off the table. But for my husband, he loves it. So that's great for him. You got to find what works for you.
Yeah, not everybody's gonna like the same thing, and you may
Yep.
think you will like something and hate it, or think you'll hate something and love it. So
Yeah.
you never know, right? You got to just go out there and try it all, see what
Yeah.
sticks, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So is there anything else that you'd like to share, add?
No, I have so loved talking with you. It has been so, I think, therapeutic for me, and I hope helpful for others. And just thank you so much for offering this space for all of us, because it can be a very lonely road. And thank you for trying to make it less lonely.
Well, and thank you so much for coming on and, being so open about your experience and your feelings. And I definitely know it'll help other people who are going through the same
Yeah.
thing.
Thank you so much. And hopefully one day I can, wear one of like those rainbow dresses and,
Yeah.
for the arrival of my double rainbow baby.
I'm going to be hopeful and say that yes, that is going to happen.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your story with us. We talked a lot about hope in this episode. And speaking from experience, I know just how hard it is to remain hopeful when we're in the depths of our grief. It's so hard to believe that things will ever be different or ever be better. But as Karen said, we have to find some way of bringing hope and joy into our lives again. For her, it's through creating new things that weren't there before. For me, it's been helping other loss and infertility parents. For you, it might be something completely different. But the bottom line is that it's good for you to have those happy moments amidst your grief. Find something, anything, that brings out that hope and joy for yourself. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.